I'm Shawn Casemore. Thanks again for joining me on another one of my empowerment series videos aimed at helping you help your team achieve peak performance. You know, I was recently interviewed for a podcast. I do quite a few podcasts where I've been interviewed on the ideas of how to improve team performance. And the question that was asked to me is, Shawn, what are your top 4 tips? Top 4 tips for how to ensure a team achieves peak performance. How do you ensure as a leader your team is working towards peak performance? You know, I shared those 4 tips. I'm going to share them with you in just a moment, but there was a critical mistake that I made. I missed the 5th point, which I should have demanded. I should have made it number 1 in this list, because in today's day and age, it's so critically important. So I thought, well, how do I solve this? I can create this video to speak to this. In fact, in case you heard that podcast interview and you came back here, you'd get the broader list that I want to share with you. So let's begin. If you're a leader and you want to have a team that achieves peak performance, you have some responsibilities, obviously, but those responsibilities might not be what you think. Now, for a second, I want to frame what your world is probably like. Number 1, you're probably quite busy. My guess is you don't have a lot of time to spend with your people. Well, good news is this. Some of the things I'm going to suggest are quite simple, but they're really your responsibility. They're something that you need to do if, in fact, you're going to be successful in helping your team reach those higher levels of performance. So, step 1, quite simple again. What I want you to focus on is listening more than you speak. You know, I heard some time ago this phrase that, you know, we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Problem is we don't always use it that way. You need to listen more, speak less. You know, you'd be surprised at what you learn. And this is actually something I learned early on in sales. You know, when you're trying to sell, I sold cars at a very young age, and when you'd walk out into that parking lot and see the customer for the first time, I was nervous. So I would talk. I could talk about the weather, what they're wearing, their kids, whatever. Problem is, I wasn't learning anything about what they were looking for, what they were interested in. So I might be talking to the point of being irritating. Heaven forbid. Hopefully I'm not doing that for you. So as a leader, and I applied this then to the leadership experience I had for nearly 2 decades, I tried to force myself to listen more than I speak, because I found oft times I would get information, ideas, and I could really understand where the individual that I'm speaking to, where their head is at, so that I could then position my responses in a much better way. So as a leader, some of us are naturally born to want to listen more than we speak, but others aren't. If this is a skill you don't have or it's not a strength for you, you need to practice listening more than you speak. That's step number 1. Step number 2, and it's kind of along the same lines. When you're dealing with people, what I'd like you to do is ask more questions. You know, to me, leadership is about being curious. It's about learning about people, how they tick, how they function, what makes them show up for work, what makes them want to be more productive. The only way to learn that is to ask questions. So, for example, if somebody comes to you with, what do you think I should do here? A good response is, well, I have some ideas, but first, what do you think you should do? That's the only way for me to really gauge, from their perspective, where their skill level is at. And, of course, I want to reduce their reliance on me making decisions. Oftentimes what I would do is send them back to the team itself and say, well, you know, again, I got some ideas. Let's go and talk to Bob and Sally. I think they've tackled this before, and see what they have to say. Now, what am I doing there? I'm actually creating an environment where I'm helping the individual, the employee, learn that they can trust their team member as much or more than they can trust me. So that frees up my time, but it helps build the strength of the team. So that's step number 2. Ask more questions. And for some of you, this will be a challenge. You really have to work on this. The third thing I wanted to mention to you was really around the idea of dealing with individuals. You have to recognize that everybody is an individual. Meaning that although I've got policies and procedures on how things are done, I measure people's performance against standards, whether they be written standards or standards that I deem acceptable. But the challenge is that everybody is an individual. Therefore, I need to treat them as an individual. The only way to do that is to get to know them. So if I recognize this individuality, what it in turn drives is I have different conversations with different people about the same topic. Now notice, I'm not suggesting that you be unfair or inconsistent, but if you realize everybody is an individual and different, it helps us gauge how we position communications, how we have meetings. Here's an example. I had an employee years ago who was really good one-on-one with people, always giving them instructions. Everybody went to her for ideas on how to do things. So one day I knew she had tackled the problem. We were about to have our team meeting where there's about 20 people around. I said, hey, just before the meeting, I'm going to ask you to come up and just share that. She came up beside me and said, Shawn, don't you dare put me up in front of those people. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. And I realized after the fact that she liked the one-on-one interaction, but didn't want to be in front of a group. In fact, had I have done that, it would have demotivated her and probably ticked her off a little bit. So by getting to know her, right, I was able to realize what environment she works best in, what motivates her. And by doing that, she said to me as I moved into another department, Shawn, you're one of the best managers I ever had. I'm quite confident the only reason she thought that was because I treated her as an individual. So that's step number 3. Step number 4 I wanted to mention to you is again, maybe a little bit counterintuitive. So we've talked about listening more than you speak. We've talked about asking more questions. We've talked about understanding and dealing with everybody as an individual. Here's the other more counterintuitive piece. To be an effective leader means, in fact, that you turn leadership over to your people. Okay, let me say that again. If you're an effective leader, you actually help others lead. You turn leadership over to your people. To build a high-performing team does not require a high-performing boss. It requires people on the team that work well together. So in effect, your role as a leader is to break down barriers and obstacles that are impacting that team. If the team believes that something's not working well or something's unfair, your job is to try and overcome that. If some of the team members are not getting along very well, your job is to facilitate a better dialogue, a better discussion between the two of them. You are, in effect, a barrier breaker downer. Is that a right term? That's not a right term. You are someone who breaks down barriers for team members. You know, I learned this early in my career. I worked with a group that was highly knowledgeable in what they were doing. They had been doing it for nearly a decade, every single employee, about 15 of them in all. And there was constant issues they would bring to me, and I'd do my best to go talk to the person responsible or create a new process or get new tools or resources, whatever it was. And again, when I moved on from that department, one of the guys, very kind of gruff and direct, pulled me aside and said, Shawn, it's too bad you're leaving. And I said, yeah, I'm going to miss you guys. He said, you're the only manager I ever had that tried to help me. You dealt with all the, and I won't insert the word here he used, but all the crap, and just let me do my job. The light went on. I realized, generally, people are just trying to do their job, but they hit barriers. My job is not to tell them what to do, it's to break down barriers. So as an effective leader, if you do that, you help your team perform because you eliminate these obstacles that slow them down. So here's the last one and the most important one I missed mentioning in this interview. Trust. It's as simple as that. In today's day and age, people have less trust for others that they don't know. Think about it. What has social media created for us? It's created this world for us to live in, right? We go online and everybody you've selected as a friend in Facebook creates this world for you. And when you read that, that's how you interpret the world around you. Which means that as your leader, if I'm not your friend on Facebook, and I don't think I should be, but that's another story. If I'm not your friend on Facebook, I might not be part of your world, which means I'm an outsider to you. So I really have to invest time in building trust. Now, going back to what I said earlier, how do you do that? Well, as a leader, I invest time getting to know you. I treat you as an individual. I ask more questions to understand what you're thinking. I cherish the responses you give. Right? I listen more than I speak. All these previous things we've talked about help me build trust. But if I don't achieve trust, you as a team member, as an employee, will never perform at a peak level and you'll never be willing to perform well with others. You won't want to collaborate. So that's critical to helping your team improve and achieve high performance. So I hope you've enjoyed these tips. If some of these didn't make sense or you'd like more information on them, feel free to reach out. Drop me a note, Shawn at Casemore & Co. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. You can also leave a comment below. Thanks again for joining me today. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Take care.